Legion season finale, episode 8, everyone. Don't you just wish that, things like, moments like this, you wish for a bigger budget and a longer running time for a season finale? Now, I'll go into this in more detail as I talk about the episode. First of all, what I'd like to say is the first 5-10 minutes, for me, just seemed a bit pointless. The whole backstory about the Division 3 guy just seemed a bit pointless. I'm quite happy to see a flashback to when they first met in episode 1, and obviously David, uses his pyrokinesis to, burn them all while he jumps into the swimming pool under the water. And I get the whole point in the flashback. I really, really do. However, I didn't really see the point in delving into his personal life. However, don't get me wrong, by the time we get into the episode, I did come to the conclusion that the reason for that is because he's now going to be in it for season 2, which of course we now know is being greenlit, that there is going to be a season 2, which I'm very, very happy about. But for this particular episode, I just thought that whole backstory was pretty unnecessary. Now, going into the episode, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The thing that really got my taste buds tingling, you know what I mean, is the bit where Oliver and Dr. Carey, they put that force field around him to suck out all everything that wasn't David, and then we see David watching his past flash before his eyes, you know what I mean? And one thing, first of all, that I picked up on is the thing that has actually progressed throughout all these episodes is the changing of his t-shirt. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but the changing of his t-shirt, what I mean by that is, I'm looking back over the episodes, and especially with the where the Shadow King presence became more prevalent to David and to us as the audience, is, for example, there was one t-shirt where he has an arrow pointing this way. And during that episode is when the Shadow King crept up on him more and started taking more control. For example, the episode where the Shadow King completely takes over. This is prior to when they have him and Sydney have dream sex, and you see the arm come round his shoulder. Now, obviously, the arrow on his t-shirt relates to, the Shadow King on David's shoulder. And in this episode, while when he's in the real world, he's got the yellow triangle there, almost like we are one, we are together. So David's got control. And then during the dream sequence, it turns grey, but there's still an outline of the arrow. And then the more of the, the personalities or everything that isn't David leaves him, during the dream sequence, his t-shirt goes completely grey. And I thought that was a nice little touch there, to be honest with you. I really, really like that. Now, to the real meat of David in that moment is when he comes to the conclusion that the Shadow King should be inside him. Because they've been together for such a long time, that they belong together. And that in itself really does bring the whole title of the episode and the whole essence of David from the comics to the TV show, is that when he should really be addressing himself, saying, who are you? I am Legion, we are many. David can only exist with all these different personalities inside him. So my prediction, for example, for the second season of Legion will be the Shadow King must return to David, and David can gain complete control because, he is Legion, he is many. And that's the whole point. Now, what I did feel let down about is the fact that didn't really come, they didn't give us that. I wanted the episode to end where, there'll be a final camera shot on David's face, and, here's a good way to explain it. Do you remember the film Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho with Norman Bates? And there's that moment right at the end when he's being arrested and he's sat in a prison cell and his mother's talking to him, saying, don't swap, that fly on your hand, There's no need to swat it. I'm going to stop you from swatting the fly. And then he looks up at the camera and half of his face turns into his mother's face. I wanted that kind of ending to this episode, where David is accepted the Shadow King, that the Shadow King belongs to him, and it's the Carrie metaphor, and it's the Dr. Carrie metaphor about the fact that Carrie and Dr. Carrie belong together. They have to exist as one. And I really wanted to see that in this episode, to be honest with you, in regards to a finale to the season. Now, just imagine if this TV show didn't get a second season, then the way this ended wouldn't have been an acceptable ending, as far as I'm concerned, without a sequel. However, if it didn't get a season 2, the best way to end it would be that David has taken the Shadow King in and he's now got control, and they live together. They live together inside David's mind. And I think that would have been a brilliant way to end it, and it would have really given us the whole Legion closure. You know, again, I am Legion, we are many. And I think that really would have been a brilliant way to end the season. Now, don't get me wrong, the ending was absolutely awesome. I mean, that moment where Sydney decides to take action into her own hands and she absorbs the Shadow King, and then the Shadow King moves from her into Carrie. Carrie kicks ass, and then David just appears out of nowhere and just levitates towards her. He's like, oh yeah, whoa. It was absolutely awesome. And yes, he hasn't got a budget, but that moment where David forces the Shadow King out is just absolutely quality. It almost gave me kind of moments of Matrix, you know, when he's running towards Agent Smith at the end of the Matrix and goes inside him. I would have liked to have seen something like that if David morphed through Carrie, and as he morphed through Carrie, forced the Shadow King out, and that's where the Shadow King's essence flew through the door and went into Oliver. But what I do like is the fact that, I mean, at the end of the day, Oliver's, he's clearly got a power of some kind. You know what I mean? I mean, apart from being absolutely barking mad, and he's a bit of a hippie, I like the fact that now the Shadow King is with a presence that is a bit lost. You know, it has been lost for 20 years in the astral plane and doesn't really live in the real world. So Oliver can be clearly fooled by the Shadow King and probably embraces the Shadow King as well. And it also gives us a perfect opportunity to see more of that awesome actor who, is anybody out there, has anybody seen What We Do in the Shadows, the Taika Waititi movie, the guy who's going to direct Thor Ragnarok? He did What We Do in the Shadows, which is a film about a bunch of vampires who all share this house together. Now, what's his face? I don't know his name, but he's in that, and he plays like the Vlad the Impaler, Dracula, sexy type of vampire, and I thought that was pretty sweet. He's a brilliant actor. I'd love to see him in loads of other stuff as well, to be honest with you, because he's spot on. He's the right dude. But anyway, back to the episode. So yeah, I mean, that ending was absolutely spot on in regards to leading on to another season. And if we're going to take this next season into account, we now know that Division 3 are going to join with the wannabe X-Men and David in order to track down the Shadow King. And the journey of the Shadow King now can only mean one thing, is that, you know, it's going to want to go after Professor Xavier. So what more can we want? Now, that leads me on to my final thing, and my final thing is, who do you want to be Professor X? If Professor X is going to turn up, do we want to see Patrick Stewart play Professor X in Season 2 of Legion? No, I don't want him to. And the reason being is because he's going to be like 78 years old or something. So what I'd like to see in Season 2 is that if Professor X is going to turn up in it, is that we're not going to see his face. You know what I mean? We're only going to, I don't know, see a projection of him. Maybe Oliver there'll be an episode where Oliver actually confronts Professor Xavier, and Professor Xavier's just like sat in an office somewhere in the shadows, and we only get to see the mental projection of him, and it's done in some kind of bizarre, nuanced way. Similar to last week's episode where David was imagining his father fighting against the Shadow King, and it's all presented to us on a chalkboard. You know what I mean? I want to see that kind of thing if we're ever going to see Professor X. Maybe it's going to be displayed in some kind of bonkers Big Trouble in Little China samurai kind of way. You know when Egg Shen is fighting against David Lo Pan and they're fighting with their magical powers and they both become samurai, kind of metaphorical samurai battling each other. I want to see that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm really sad that it's finished because, well, I'm sad, but I'm not sad. I mean, it's the perfect amount of episodes for a season. It makes every episode really, really solid. And it also makes us want to kind of, we're begging for more. Now, let me know what you think. Let me know what your final thoughts are on Legion Season 1. Did it give you everything you want? Has it made you want to research more about the character of Legion in the comics, about David? And if you already know a lot about David from the comics, how does this measure up? And does this live action interpretation, does it hit all the beats that you wanted? Personally, I'm treating it like an origin, and as long as, let's say in the next season, are we going to see someone else inside David's psyche come out? Are we going to see where David's other powers come from? Let's say his pyrokinesis, his telekinesis, his ability to teleport. I want to see where those powers came from, because at the end of the day, I mean, David is like the best way I see David is the fact that he's like one giant sponge and he just absorbs these powers one way or another, you know, from different people, from different personalities. Because yes, I know he's a schizophrenic, and the schizophrenia is presented through different powers, but I want to see these other personalities inside David's mind. Anyway, guys, what I'd like to say is that if you've got any other kind of suggestions in regards to things I should be reviewing from now on, I will be doing Doctor Who, by the way. Doctor Who starts in a couple of weeks. Yay! I've got the last episode of Walking Dead to review, which is on next week. I'm looking forward to that. We've also got the Star Trek TV show coming up soon. But anyway, you keep me on my toes, because you know there's going to be a couple of weeks now where there's not going to be a great deal to watch. From my point of view anyway, and I really want some ideas, and I want to keep you guys watching. So anyway, season finale, 10 out of 10. Legion Season 1, 10 out of 10. Absolutely loved it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Click subscribe if you want to see more. Peace out, and I'll see you next time.
Let it all hang out, but you won't fool the children of the revolution.